Hello, 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 everyone. It is Dr. Tay with yet another episode of Late Night Latte. Thank you all for joining. This is going Facebook is deciding whether or not it wants to. Oh, here we go. Hello, sis. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you so much for agreeing to join me tonight for Late Night Latte. I'm really excited to have you. I know I contacted you a little while ago and asked you to be on the broadcast, and we weren't really sure what we were going to talk about. And you said, I could talk about it all, so you just need to you need to give me a lane to stay in. But we
Real.
settled on growth and grief. And I think this is really going to be a powerful discussion for all of those who tune in. So, without further ado, folks, this is Selina Sosa. She is the founder and visionary of Ethnic Perspective, which is, like I said, a nonprofit organization. And she's going to tell us a little bit about that later. But I want you to hear from her lips who she is and what she does. So, tell us a little bit about Selina Sosa.
Well, this crazy Latina over here trying to take over the world. Well, like Dr. Tay said, my name is Selena Sosa, and I've always had a passion for young people, young girls. I was a product of different things. I came up in what I considered a really good home, but I just made some choices that changed my life. You know what I mean? I was a teen mom, and in the process of going through all of that, as I got older, I wanted to really, talk to young people and do things with kids. And eventually life led me down a road where I could do that. But back in 2016, which I would consider like the cusp of my life, things just really hit the fan, just in my entire life. I just really felt just called by the Lord to just kind of stop working after working over 20 years in corporate America and begin this organization because I saw a need within my community, within, my Latina girls. I didn't feel that they had uh, proper role models, if you will. I want to be careful how I say them, but
Right.
I just where, it's like I don't want to say underserved, but there isn't enough of the Latina voice out there. I mean, it's coming up now, but when I was growing up, it wasn't evident. And actually in 2016, I didn't see that power in it. You could see it in, the entertainment industry, but not in any other area. And so
Right.
that was just really disheartening for me. So what I wanted to do was just locally find women who were like trailblazers doing amazing things, where we didn't have to, like go through security guards and all that. Just, your next door neighbor who's a lawyer, a doctor,
Mm-hmm.
a business owner, whatever, we just really wanted to reach out to those women and show these girls, hey, you can achieve all of this. You can do all of this. You don't have to be a booty shaker, like I like to say, to make it.
Right.
Is that too much?
No,
So
girl, you can be real. This is the broadcast to be real.
So anyway, long story short, that's how ethnic perspective started, and then it evolved. So it evolved from wanting to mentor young girls into now we're kind of ministering with women, and we're just really trying to lift up women and encourage them to be all that they can be. So whether you're just starting out as a teenager or having a midlife crisis or wherever you are in your journey and in your walk, we want to be a part of it because we want you to fulfill the complete destiny that has been set out for your life. So it is
Right.
evolving. So that's just the gist
Awesome.
of it.
Well, thank you for sharing. And clearly, you have done a lot and you've experienced a lot, and you're using that as part of your platform for
Yeah,
serving people through ethnic perspective. But I'm sure that you can attest to this, that we aren't only the sum total of our accomplishments, but we're
that's
also a
right.
product of the challenges that we've experienced. Now, and the topic is growth and grief. And
Yeah.
I was wondering, what situation do you think has affected you most strongly?
Mm.
And, I guess you fulfilling your purpose, but also possibly something that could have prevented you from fulfilling your purpose.
Well, something that definitely kind of put a pause, and this is where I find myself because I was running, like we were going
Mm,
full force.
you had
We
the night boots
started the
on.
organization. We wrote a book. Who you co-authored with me. Thank you so much. And all these things were happening, but in the process of that, as you know, my mother was sick. She had been diagnosed a few years back with lung cancer. She got it treated and then it metastasized to brain cancer. And so, in the process of all this happening, we're planning, and she's, getting sicker. I mean, she's positive and she wants to fight through this, but just certain things happen. And the first blow to the family actually was in December of in 2016. She was receiving treatment in Florida, and she was living with a cousin of ours. And on December 31st, he passed away unexpectedly. It was a shock to everyone, and we had to deal with that. And in that process, I had to then move her here with me, which I did gladly, and I'm grateful for. It was a hard time, but during all of this, um,
Mhm.
we're doing the organization, we're planning a conference. I'm homeschooling my son. I'm trying to support my husband, through the process of what he was doing in church at the time. And it was a lot. And I really, I always say that I garner my strength from the Lord, and I really do believe that that's where it was. But I tell you what, um, everything just kind of, I wasn't realizing that there was a slow breakdown mentally and emotionally. And you
Mm,
don't notice it right away because you stay busy. You know what I mean? There
right,
was so much going on. And so I'm traveling, but my mom can't express her pain. You know what I mean? I'm traveling and I'm writing, but I can't have that one-on-one conversation that I would like with her. You know
right.
what I mean? And I'm just watching this deterioration. So what do you do? And you and I kind of had this conversation a little bit on how, you know, a lot of the times it's almost like you kind of shut down just a little bit in order to, to process. And there were
Right.
moments where I was talking to, family members or, just, and well, how are you doing, Selena? I'm fine. No, I'm fine. We're good. It's hard to see her like that, but I'm okay. But I just
Hmm.
couldn't really process. And I think that everything came to a head, our first conference. And actually, I just want to backtrack 1 second because I remember one of my cousins in the process of us planning for this conference. She said to me, we kind of knew that things were kind of coming to a head with my mother. And she
Right,
said to me, "Well, Selena, what are you gonna do if your mom passes during the time of the conference?" And I told her, I said,
right,
"What will I be able to do? That I don't know. I can't, if I'm there, will." I guess it was just one of those things like, what do you do? And
right.
it was a tough, tough call. And of course, I get the call. I'm in Florida. My mom's already in, I think it's North Carolina is where she
Mm,
went, or South Carolina, doesn't matter. But I get the call the night before. Uh, we're gonna have this conference that she passed. And I had to kind of sit there. And I remember I had a sister with me in the car, and she was just like, "Are you okay?" And the first thing that I thought was, "Well, I have to call my grandmother." So, and just again, that like that mode, you know what I mean? Like, I got to take care of this, got to be strong,
Right.
got to move. But ultimately, I know, and without a doubt, and I know a lot of people don't understand this, and it's not that I wasn't hurting, it's not that it wasn't difficult, but I just know that I was calling on the Lord for that strength. I don't know if I hadn't really known the Lord, I don't know that I would have handled it the way that I did. And
Right.
so we had to spend that weekend, ministering to other women, loving on other women. And again, it was just kind of that shutdown. So, fast forwarding, then coming home, thinking about the kids, thinking about my grandmother, trying to ensure that her wishes were met. That was all a process because in that, you have family members that kind of, I guess, consider you callous or uncaring, or,
Mm,
people want certain things a certain way. Some people are losing it, and I'm, not expressively crying in front of everybody. I'm actually a very emotional person. You know what I mean? Like I do wear my heart in my sleeve, but for me, this was a time where it was just something that I couldn't do. I didn't know how
right.
to do it actually. And I
Hmm.
and I didn't want to do it because if I expressed that emotion, for me, it needed to be around someone that I knew that could really support me at that moment, that
Right.
actually understood what I was going through.
Right.
And so I'm still, I mean, we haven't even hit a year yet and I'm still going, but there are those moments that where I do cry, there's moments where I hear songs or I hear her voice or I get to see something that we talked about and I have to reconcile that in my heart and in my spirit. But the hardest thing going through grief and trying to grow and expand in that really isn't so much what you're going through is those around you. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Whether they can either make it difficult or easy for you. Like if I
right.
have to worry about whether or not you're feeling good about something or whether or not I'm expressing myself the way you feel it's necessary, that's too much. Like you shouldn't put that pressure on anyone.
Right.
So it's just, I mean, for me, that has been, I guess, the most difficult thing. And just being able to just talk it through. Um, it's helped me grow in a sense to understand that you can't be prepared for anything. Whether
Right.
someone's gonna pass or whether it comes suddenly, you can never prepare for it. And the
Mhm.
expectations you cannot live up to on what that looks like. I know people that will throw themselves on the ground and do all of that and a month later be fine. You know what I mean? And then you have people
Right.
like me that I'm like, okay, how do I walk through this? How do I handle this? And how do I help my kids through this process? There's so many other people involved. And again, my strength is just drawn from up high. So
Right.
it's
And when
been
And one thing that you said, I think, is really important. And when we go through grief, oftentimes we're just thinking about how I'm experiencing it, how I'm dealing with the loss. And I want to give the disclaimer that grief doesn't have to be the loss of the loss of a loved one. In
correct.
Selena's case, that was the situation, but it could be the loss of a job, the loss of a relationship. And oftentimes we think about, okay, well, how am I responding? How am I affected? But it's so important that you said it's about the people around you. And you really have
Mhm.
to, if you have to protect yourself from the people around you so that you can grieve, maybe they should be
Mhm.
there for the process. And you said that, you might have, people might have perceived you as callous,
Mhm.
and everybody grieves differently. So
Mhm.
how did you navigate that process with the people in your family? Was it that they perceived you as callous, or were you concerned about their perception? Because the reality and our perception aren't always aligned. So what was the situation in your case?
So I think that
Oh, we lost her. I don't. Okay. And didn't want to be late for late night latte, so I don't have my latte with me. But just take in all of this car background, and change is always good. We'll be back to the regularly scheduled programming next week. You're back. I'm so glad.
What happened?
I was just recapping for those who were not present for the beginning of the broadcast, just telling them a little bit about you and our connection. So it's not just, I didn't just Google you and say, "Can you be on my late night latte?" That you're like a sister, and how your mom I've known since I was 5. So but we were talking about perception versus reality, and how you were processing the loss of your mom. Did people really think you were callous, or was it your concerns about their perception?
I mean, there was some discussion, you get things from family members who say things and stuff, but the reason, why I kind of feel that way is I just remember um, during that time, like my mom wanted certain things. She didn't want certain people to see her and stuff, and a lot of our family couldn't understand that. And so
Mm,
at one point, once everything was said and done, I just remember, telling one of my family members, it's interesting how everybody loved her so much, but the things that she valued the most were her grandkids, and nobody asked how they were doing.
mm,
Not no one called to they were, no one called. I mean, it wasn't even about me. It was just, when someone loses someone, you want to make sure there's nothing that you could do for the person that's lost, but there's a whole family that's left behind, and
yeah,
I can, I mean, I can count to this day those that check in and ask how the boys are doing. You know what I mean? And that to me is the biggest thing, because that was their life and she was their life. You know what I mean? It was like,
right, right. Yeah, I remember when Justin was born. Yeah.
yes, you know how that was. And so that was really difficult to deal with. And so perhaps, and I don't know. I mean, like I said, I know that there was some conversation, and it really, in all honesty, it's really not important, but I think it's important to talk about, because if you're on the other side of this, understand that just because, like what you were saying before, just because a person doesn't react the way you think they should doesn't mean that they're not hurting.
Right.
And you don't always know the inside and the outside of a relationship. You know what I mean? What you see, I mean, you and we've never had an issue, but you and I can have an issue with one another. But that doesn't mean that we're not friends, that we don't love each other, that we won't be there for one another. So what you see doesn't necessarily mean what's going on the inside, just,
Right.
and I think
Right.
people need to understand that. And so um, it was just the feeling that I got, it was odd. It was odd to be like, okay, like I get it, but I just, we lost a mom, we lost a grandmother, and
Hmm.
my grandmother lost her only daughter. So there's
Right.
just a lot to it. I think, I think sometimes it can be perception. It can also be the way people treat you. And so that was the hardest thing. And I guess, what I mean to say, because even I, like growing up, always wondered why did some people cry and others don't? You know what I mean? Like, that's just so weird. Don't you care? But being
Hmm.
on the other side, where now it's you just deal with it differently. And this was the one thing, or I guess the one time that it wasn't something that I didn't want to express in front of just anyone.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah. So one thing that you said is you expressed it differently and you were mindful of who you expressed it around,
mhm.
and I think that's so important because everyone, like I said before, everyone grieves differently, and we have to be careful not to judge people or treat them differently
Yeah,
because of
exactly.
the way they, we don't want to put them in a box. Okay, well, you're supposed to be snotting, crying, ugly worship face.
Mhm.
No, like that might not be my process. But in that, because people are so caught up with what they're going on individually,
Mhm.
they forget about
Yeah.
how everyone else is doing, and that's important. And you know people not asking about how your sons were affected,
Mhm.
there could be a lot of reasons for that, but I
Right.
can see how that could really affect your interactions. Hey,
Mhm.
Josh just signed on. That could really affect, especially with your family. Like, you're grieving, you should be rallying around each other, but then you have these concerns about what people are thinking about me and how they feel about how I'm grieving when this is my mama. You know what I mean? Like, she is family for everybody. But
Right.
that, that's really important. But I want to shift to the growth part,
Yes.
because you had this difficult, very difficult, trying circumstance go on
Mhm.
while you're transitioning your life, because you were no longer working, homeschooling your child, building this nonprofit, and then this happened. Where did the growth come? Was it growth in your interpersonal interactions, growth in
Mhm.
your faith? Was there growth? I already know the answer to that because you're sitting right here. Clearly there was. But where were you able to draw on something positive out of an otherwise negative situation?
I'm sorry. My phone is going off, so it's pausing my end. I think that's the issue. So,
No problem. Did,
so
did you
say
hear what I said?
the last part again. The last
Okay.
part, I
So,
mean, to
where were you able to draw growth out of this negative situation?
So I think, like I said, I hold strongly to my faith, and I think it's in the hope. I say this often. A lot of people that I know just don't have hope, and so
Mm,
my hope is in the Lord through every process, but most people's hope is in other people. So that's why when
mm,
there's loss, they feel like everything is gone. You know what I mean? And
right.
it's not only like what you were talking about before, it's not only loss in death, but loss in relationship, loss in a job. Like I lost my job that validated me. I lost the
Mhm.
relationship that made me feel like something. And so we put our hope in the wrong things. And I think that because my hope was placed in the right place, which is the Lord, it just helped me draw that strength to know that even if even if I was completely and utterly alone, that would have been difficult, but my hope was still in the Lord and I was going to come out of that. And so that's what helped me to persevere. The other part of that, that's the main part. The second part of that is knowing that our moment when that happens, when we're going through a loss, that's a personal thing, but life does move on. You know what I mean? Nobody waits, and it sucks. Like we do need that time to recuperate, but nobody's gonna wait for you. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
nobody's gonna wait for you to feel better, get better. Things gotta bump and grind, especially if you're still working. Like, oh, what they give you 3 days bereavement to get over a
right.
loss. Come on, you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
that's
So,
enough. Yeah.
like that's plenty of time. I'll be back. And so we kind of learn to cope with the loss. But I think for me, the growth really came in understanding that at the end of the day, this was my loss, and God is always going to work in my heart to heal me. But I had to move on. Like I can't ball up in a corner and die because I have a family that's counting on me. I have
Right.
relationships that are counting on me. And it's not about making it about everyone else because I'm all about self-care. But at the same time, after a while, you can become very selfish and just be like, I've had this loss. Don't you understand? You know what I mean? But there are things that have
Mm,
to happen. And it's almost like you stay stuck. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like you're in a repeat and you can't move from that place. And so there's so many other things that God wants to do in your life or at least bring you through and you can't because you're still in that place. And I think that that's true for any situation that you may be in. Any type of loss, whether it's a relationship or not, because we get so caught up in the whys. Then, I mean, that's normal. You know what I mean? Like I don't want
right.
to sit here and be like, oh, don't get caught up in that or don't worry about that. Like, and I'm a big hater of the word, just let it go,
Mhm.
because no one understands the process of what that means. You can't, there are just certain things that you can't just let go. You
Right.
can't tell someone who lost a child, oh, just get over it, move on. They would want you to do that, or the loss of a parent, or the loss of a parent, or, again, in a relationship or anything. It's not that simple when you've had uh, depth. You know what I mean? When you've had
Right.
something so tied together and then it's been ripped away from you, that's
Right.
not, you get to let that go. That was just taken from you. So I think the process for me was just understanding where my hope lied and that there's a goal at the end. And I couldn't stop just to kind of man, and I don't want this to sound callous, but to just kind of, babysit my feelings. You know what I mean? Because
Mhm.
I'm gonna have the moments, grief happens for the rest of your life. I'm gonna have my moments where, you know what? I need a second. I'm gonna do what I gotta do and just let this process and then continue to move on. So that's where the growth, I think for me, was just understanding that and just knowing that there's so much more. And the truth is, I know my mom would have wanted me to continue on and do these things because we had that time where I knew that she was able to share how proud she was and how excited
Mhm.
she was. And so to me, I honor her by leaving a legacy, by living my life, in such a way that honors her and everyone that I'm surrounded with. So,
Right. That's so important. And I think that I was just doing the panel discussion and someone mentioned like how do you deal with depression around the time, like the anniversary of someone's passing.
mhm,
And I think not that there's a problem with that, but the
mhm,
growth comes when it gets less difficult, not easier, but less
right,
difficult each time. And also you don't allow it to consume you. And what I heard you
right,
say, I'm paraphrasing, of course, is that you didn't allow it to consume you. You allowed yourself to have those feelings and steal away, but you didn't allow it to stop what you were doing. Stop
mhm,
you being a mom, stop you being a wife,
mhm.
stop you being a visionary and a founder of a nonprofit. Like I shared while I was waiting for you to come back on, your mom passed, what, it was days before the conference?
It was one day. It was the day before.
The day before. The
Hmm.
day before. Like, and that conference, like there were so many breakthroughs and so many people were blessed. Like I think just you going through with that was an indicator that the growth process had already started, because you were able to push past your pain
Hmm.
and do what mom probably would have wanted you to do, because you said she was proud of you, and also what God would have wanted you to do. So it sounds like you started your growth process very, very early on. And
Not even
I'm also
right.
hearing that you that you I just lost it just that quickly because somebody was walking by. But
It's
yeah,
fine.
it's a it's a process, and it's different for everyone, and growth doesn't come in the same form for everybody. So, just because you're not able to jump back in and go right back to work after a loss, it doesn't mean you're not growing. It just might mean that your growth is in a different area, or your growth might be delayed in a certain area. um but I think that you've really touched on a lot. And like I said before, grief isn't just the loss of a loved one. It could be a loss of a job. And you said you lost the job. I lost the job that validated me. That's
Mm-hmm.
huge. Like, some people
Mm-hmm.
spiral into depression or even psychosis after they
Mm-hmm.
lose their job, because their job
Mm-hmm.
is all they have. Like, there's some people, I've worked with certain clients, and their job, they might have other things going on in their lives, but their job is what makes them feel like, you know what, I can continue on, because that's where they feel
Mm-hmm.
validated. That's the only place they feel like they're doing something right. So to have that ripped away from you, that can be a
Mm-hmm.
traumatic loss. So it's not just,
Mm-hmm.
losing a loved one. It can be anything that's
Yeah.
meaningful to you. So thank you for sharing that story. I think it's really important, because grief isn't as taboo as some other topics, but I think it's
Mm-hmm.
really important that we dive into how much of a difference there is between how people
Right.
grieve. Like, I had
Mm-hmm.
similar feelings as you did when I lost my grandfather. That's like the only, I'd say, significant loss, in the sense that it was an immediate family member. I lost my grandfather in 2008, and I remember being at the funeral on the front row, and the praise dancers were dancing, and I'm standing up, and I'm praising. And I remember there was a moment, and I'm like, these people behind me probably looking at me like I'm crazy. Like, she should be slow singing and flower bringing because she just
Right.
lost her poppy. But I had already accepted the fact that, yes, he's gone, and yes, I miss him, but I already know where he is. And I was drawing on the relationship that we
Mm-hmm.
had and the memories that we had. And that's not everyone's story. But just because that's how I did it doesn't mean someone else should judge it. And just because someone else is
That's.
grieving in a different way, it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing, there's a big debate, not a big debate, like, it's not, a sexy topic, but the stages of grief. Stages suggesting that they go one after the other, after the other. And I'm sure you can attest to this. That's not the case. That's not the case. It's not
No.
like, okay, well, you're going to be in acceptance for this amount of time, and you're going to be in the stage of anger. Sometimes all the stages happen at one time, right?
Yes.
It's like, I'm angry, and I'm sad, and I'm accepting it,
Yes.
but I'm still angry, and I'm denying. It's not a step by step by step. Sometimes it's an onslaught of emotions. And I
Yes.
think another indicator of growth is accepting that
Mm-hmm.
everything isn't going to be like, grief isn't a seamless step by step process, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But as we wrap up, I want to go back to, because this is really like, I just don't know how you went through it all. But you said it hasn't come up on a year yet. It will be a year in October, right? You
Yeah.
went on with this conference the day after your mom passed. You weren't even in the state where your mom was. Like, it was like you were transplant. You were in Florida. Your husband was there. Were any of the boys there? I know Justin wasn't was
My youngest son was with us. Yes.
right. He was doing
Mm-hmm.
photography, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so here we are. It's now June, and you're
Mm-hmm.
going to be having the second conference. Like,
Mm-hmm.
wow. Talk about growth. What would have happened if you didn't have that first conference? Like, have you ever, like, sat and thought about that?
You know, I don't know. This is so hard to answer because, but I know I wouldn't be right here. Um,
Mm,
I don't know that that I would have continued to push through. And it was hard. There was a time of silence, where I really wasn't pushing as hard as I was. We were still moving, but, not
Hmm.
really pushing, at least on my end. Like there was just this kind of thing. There was just a slow go, but there was a go.
Right.
But I don't think it would be here. I don't know that we would have had the women that we have involved, because now we have more people just kind of locking arms with us. I don't
Hmm.
know that I would have been able to hear God for the opportunities, because in the end, and I think that this is what we have to remember, as women of faith, it's not, God has everything for us. He wants to do things in us and around us, but it's for the benefit of those around us, right? So,
Right.
like everything that He gives us. So, ultimately, if Selena would have stayed in a place of, balled up in a corner crying, and again, and I hope that if anybody has done that, because it's happened, I've done that. Let me just put it out there. I've been in a corner, balled up. I'm not afraid to admit it. You know what I mean? Like I'm talking about stomach hurting and all that. So I don't mean that to disparage anyone that's going through that. But what I'm saying is that if I would have chosen that I felt like I can't take this, and I'm just gonna throw myself down, there's a lot of people that I could have blessed that I wouldn't have been able to. You know what I mean? A lot of women that I've spoken to that I wouldn't have been able to speak to. I would have had so many missed opportunities just to bless someone. And that's my heart. And so, in those stages, if at that moment I would have said, forget it, we're going to cancel that. I mean, I had to think about the women that came down. You know what I mean? Some of them,
Right.
on their own dime. These are just things that, you know, it's for the sake of one. And I think about the scripture that says, He left the 99 for the one.
Right.
So
Right.
He loved that one, but I'm saying to myself, I have to take that in reverse. You know what I mean? He laid down His life for me. I can't be selfish and think about just my moment when everything has to happen. And all these there's these women there, like you said, that were going through breakthrough. I wouldn't be here if I would have said, I can't do this there. You know what I mean? And I had already determined it in my mind, and the Lord had already spoken it to me when I had that question asked. What are you going to do if your mom passes? And it's crazy
Wow.
because it's they do. You know what I mean? It was like the Lord was already preparing and speaking, and I had to verbally make that decision and know, what are you going to do? You know what I mean?
Right.
But sometimes you have to think about, the other people that are with you. It's not always about you. It's about what you can give. And I know it's hard. It's just such a hard thing to kind of, I guess, muddle through or just work through. But in the
Right.
end, I wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be having this conference, and then we wouldn't have the one coming up in October in New York. You know what I mean? And we're
Right.
planning. It's like there's all these things, that are coming, these opportunities. And I think had I said no then, when I
Mm.
hear the stories of the women and how they were changed, oh my God, I would have such regret in my heart, because I don't know where those women would be right now. And I'm not saying that
Right.
they wouldn't have gotten what they needed somewhere else, but when the Lord gives you something, He's doing it for a reason. He's asking you to do it, and it's
Right.
because you have the ability and because He desires for you to do it. I never want to say no to what He has. So
Mhm.
I can't imagine, God takes care of us during those processes, but I know that I wouldn't be here, and I know that I wouldn't be moving forward and meeting the people that I'm meeting, encountering God the way we've been encountering Him, and having the opportunities to, again, minister to all these wonderful women, young women, older women. I mean, we just wouldn't be here.
So we wouldn't be here, and here is being what's today's date? The 26th. So 4 days removed from the
Yeah.
Flourish conference. So before we wrap up, tell us a little bit about the Flourish conference.
So this second conference is under the title "The King of Heaven Wants Me," and we've been following the story of Esther, and it's just amazing how you can gather so many facets of her life and just kind of put it into all these different things, which again, nothing that that you immediately thought of. It's just the Lord kind of speaks it and you do it. And so that first conference, we felt that there was a need in Florida. We were saying that the women needed it out there, and we really believed it, and we saw that. And then it was actually on Shelley's heart to do it here in Texas. which to be honest with you, it wasn't really something that I had, thought about. Like, I was like, okay, we'll think about coming back, but I was just kind of gonna wait. And the Lord was like, no.
Right.
And so I'm thankful that God kind of puts those people that are like, just kind of drop that, hey, we have to do this and let's go here and let's go there. And I'm like, okay. And
Right.
so basically, the King of Heaven wants me is based off of Romans 5:8, where it says, and I'm paraphrasing, please go read your word. But that while I was yet a sinner, he laid down his life for me. And,
Hmm.
when I think about that, and I just want to say this to anyone who maybe knows of God or, doesn't really go to church and you know, understand that even in Christ, we make mistakes. I am the first and foremost to say that. Like I said, I had a hard year. There was a year where I was making really terrible decisions that was really destroying my life and the life of others. And so, even in the midst of that and knowing who God is, he is merciful enough that he knew that at the cross that he did that for me. So when I
Right.
say that the King of Kings wants me, it's not just, oh, I'm looking at everyone else like a heathen and you're so terrible and you need no. It's just that in our own mess, in our own place of selfishness, in our a chaotic life, when we're making all these choices and then living in this world where we get rejected by almost everyone we meet at some point or another, whether it's your father, whether it's a mother, whether it's a husband, a friend, we sense that rejection consistently, and we're
Right.
always reminded more that we're not wanted than we're reminded that we are wanted. And
Right.
so it
Right.
was just really on me to share, hey, he wants you. And that's really what I believe that every woman who's going to be there, including yourself, I'm so excited, is really going to share, just a facet of that, just a facet of the whys, why he wants us, why he loves us. And we can never truly comprehend, but just know that he does. So if there's a man that left you or someone that rejected you that you love, you know what? There's someone who does love you, and that's what you have to look towards. And so, and the same thing, with a parent, a lot of us have experienced that, I have, and so, but there were people around me who loved me and accepted me, but we just get caught up in those that don't because we don't understand it. And so I just really feel that it's important for us to understand that there is this amazing King of Heaven that wants you, wants just you, no strings attached. There isn't a if you do this, I'll do that. None of that. You don't have to work for anything that he has to give you. He just loves you. And to
Mhm.
me, I just want to share that with every woman that I come across. And that's part of this conference is about that. So.
And where is the conference? When is it?
It is in Dallas, Texas. So it'll be it is in Dallas, Texas, June 30th. It starts 9:30 and it'll run till 4. It's at Hope City, Dallas, which this church has graciously provided their space for us, which is amazing, in the lovely city of Oak Cliff. And we are determined to share God's love for the city of Oak Cliff and just to all the women that come. So if you're in the area, if you can travel, please do so. Free registration. We are not charging you a dime. We want you to be there because we just want to share God's love with you. And again, it's June 30th, this Saturday, 9:30 to 4 at Hope City, Dallas, in Oak Cliff.
Awesome. I'm excited to be there as well. I will be flying in that morning. As you know, Grandpa signed on and he said hello. Hi, Grandpa.
Abuelo.
um, so I'm really excited to be down there and to share with all of the women. But I'm excited that you signed on today. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview. Like I said, your story of growing even in grief is so multifaceted, and I think there are elements of it that anybody can really extract and apply to their life. So thank you for your willingness to be open about that and to share. Um, any final any final words of encouragement that you'd like to share with everyone before we sign off?
So I just want to say if there's anyone out there in any area of grief, allow yourself to go through the process how you feel fit for you. Um, just remember not to stay stuck in that place. Give yourself room and time. Don't let anyone dictate what your grief should look like. And do things that you know will help you come out of that process or walk through that process. Again, like Dr. Tay said, grief is not just the loss of a loved one. It could be any type of loss, but you have to learn to process and don't just stay there. If you find yourself kind of like 6 months down the line, seven, still complaining, you know what I mean? And I'm not talking about the loss of a loved one. I'm just saying, just in general, just complaining about it over the same thing. And you're not seeing yourself kind of at least take one step forward, ask somebody to step in and help you walk through that. Because sometimes we just need someone to just kind of, process what we're going through.
Right.
And so I just encourage you, seek the Lord, find hope in places that aren't, that isn't dependent on someone else. Find hope in the Lord, find hope in who he is and what he can do for you. Because I'm telling you right now, it is so difficult. We will always fail you. Man will always fail. I don't mean to fail anyone, but I will fail you at some point in your life. And it sucks. I hate to know that's a reality. And
Right.
so, but I know that God never fails me. And so find your hope in the Lord and just see that he can take you through that process, and find a brother or sister that's just willing to carry you in that, even if it's just being an ear. So
Right.
that's all.
Yes, support systems are so important. So thank you so much for sharing those words of encouragement. Like you mentioned, the King of Heaven Wants Me, the second installation of the Flourish Conference, is happening at Hope City. What, Hope City Oak Cliff,
Denver.
or oh,
It's called
um,
Hope.
oh, okay, in Oak Cliff. I should know since I'm going there, right? Uh, it's on this Saturday from 9:30 to 4. If you are in the area, definitely register. You can register at ethnicperspective.org. That's the organization's website. Follow on social media. It's at Ethnic Perspective on Instagram and Facebook as well. If you are interested, not if, because you will be interested, Ethnic Perspective also published a book. If you follow the Dr. Tay Coast, I always trip. It's a process. If you follow the Dr. Tay page, if you follow the Dr. Tay page, you'll see Rise Up to Greatness, a young woman's devotional. Purchase that. It's available on the website. It's also available on Amazon.com. And you don't have to be a young woman to receive from the awesome stories that are written by the 11 women who contributed to it. So definitely support Ethnic Perspective. If you're in the area, come to the conference. We'll be excited to see you and welcome you with open arms, and buy the book and support the ministry. Yeah. But thank you to all of you who tuned in. I appreciate you so much for rocking out with me every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Next Tuesday is Independence Day Eve, but we will still have late night latte. I might actually have a real latte. We'll see how it goes. Um, and not be sitting in the car. But definitely tune in next week for Late Night Latte as well. Selena, thank you so, so much. I am excited to hug your neck, as you say, and see you on Saturday. I know that it's going to be a great outcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, and I cannot wait to see you.
All right. Love you so much. And thank you, everyone. Love you guys. And thank you for tuning in. And I will see you next week for another episode of Late Night Latte with Dr. Tay. Have a good one, everybody.
Night.